Good evening from New York. Rare is the uprising that can be characterized with the adjective serene. Our fifth story in the countdown, what could be 1 million Iranian protesters. Their numbers and resolve growing by the day, quietly flooding the streets of Tehran in a show of defiance and mourning. Demonstration as funeral march, nearly. Protesters pouring into the streets to mourn those who have been killed since the results of Iran's disputed election were released. Black, the dominant color today, in addition to the green of the leading opposition candidate, Mir Hossein Mousavi. Many protesters holding pictures of the victims, at least 15 people having been killed in this week's violence. Even Iranian state TV put the size of today's crowd at hundreds of thousands. A website for Mr. Mousavi estimating turnout was about 1 million. Mr. Mousavi himself addressing the demonstrators via loudspeaker, calling on his supporters to remain peaceful but not to give up. The Iranian government having tried to preclude today's demonstration by offering to meet with all three opposition candidates on Saturday to listen to their allegations of vote rigging. 6 days into the dispute, this offer clearly not nearly enough. President Ahmadinejad also making an attempt to appear conciliatory, at least, in a statement broadcast on state TV, distancing himself from earlier comments in which he had compared protesters to soccer hooligans and dismissed them as dust. Today, Ahmadinejad saying, quote, every single Iranian is valuable. The government is at everyone's service. We like everyone. Earlier efforts at stopping the uprising by force seeming to have failed. An amateur video purporting to show the damage at Tehran University after pro-government militias are alleged to have raided the campus on Monday. As many as 200 students said to have been detained. The supreme leader to speak at the university tomorrow, that's overnight our time, during Friday prayers in what is expected to be a call for peace, combined with a warning of severe consequences if protests continue. Meanwhile, here in the United States, the White House trying to answer criticism from Republicans that it is not doing enough to back Mousavi and his supporters. Press Secretary Robert Gibbs with a reminder that the president does support them even if he cannot intervene.
The president has spoken to, in many ways, the causes and concerns of many that are marching in Iran by demonstrating, one, that he shares their concern and the international concern about the way the election was conducted. Secondly, he believes that there is a universal principle of demonstrating without the fear of harm.
President Obama's Republican opposition, including some of the same people who had joked about wanting to bomb Iran, now expressing outrage that the Obama administration is not doing enough. Minority Whip Cantor saying in a statement, quote, America has a moral responsibility to stand up for these brave people, to defend human rights, and to condemn the violence and abuses by the regime in Tehran. Congressman Cantor adding that it is because of its election brutality that the Iranian government cannot be trusted with nuclear power. Well, that makes sense. And as we reported first here last night, Congressman Pete Hoekstra comparing the use of Twitter by the Iranians to organize and get the message out in their life and death struggle for democracy to how members of his party in this country used Twitter to complain about Speaker Nancy Pelosi's decision to adjourn Congress last year. Quote, Iranian Twitter activity similar to what we did in House last year when Republicans were shut down in the House. Yes, this would be the same congressman who last year tweeted the whereabouts of a top-secret mission to Iraq. Hoekstra's spokesman failing to explain it away today when he added to this controversy by saying his boss did not compare the ongoing violence in Iran to when Democrats shut down the House chamber during the energy debate last summer, but he added the two situations were very similar. Trying to assess the situation in Iran requires greater expertise than I have, certainly, and we're fortunate enough once again to be joined by Chief Foreign Correspondent Richard Engel. And it's good to have you again and good to have you in town for this.
Thank you very much.
Cracking down did not limit the size of the crowds. They came out and fought their whatever fears they might have.
The crowds have also taken a different approach. They're now trying to be peaceful. They are not shouting any slogans. They are, by and large, silent. So it's a different approach. They're directly trying to, or actively trying to avoid confrontation.
Is there any indication of cause and effect on this? Is that like an agreement between these two sides, or did it just work out this way that there would be a different approach from the government and from the protesters?
No, it's a very, very smart campaign by Mousavi and some of his advisors say that they are taking inspiration from other movements that have worked in the past, particularly Gandhi, and some people are even comparing this to Gandhi's movement. But the idea of holding these peaceful protests is to not provoke the police, and we haven't seen that much violence. The violence was in the early days, and according to different sources, there are at least 15 people have been killed. It hasn't been a brutal crackdown. There have been quite a few arrests, quite a bit of intimidation, but we have not seen any of that, Tiananmen Square moment.
Is that still a prospect?
It depends what happens tomorrow. Tomorrow is key. Yes, it's still a prospect, but if the movement stays peaceful, it would be difficult for the government to open fire on hundreds of thousands or perhaps as many as 1 million people. Tomorrow, the reason it's so key is that the Supreme Leader is putting himself out there, and there's 3 things that he could say. One, he could say, I accept the demands of the demonstrators, which would be to give in, and he would be throwing Ahmadinejad under a bus and emerging as a leader and saving himself. And that's one possibility. It could happen.
It would totally change his nation, of course.
It would totally change his nation. It would say that he is now accountable to popular will and that there was a mistake in the system, and he's calling for a new election. It could happen if he wants to emerge as a Juan Carlos of Spain, a savior of the nation in time of crisis. The other option is that he comes out and he says, this is a serious time. We must appeal as Iranians to calm. We must respect the ideals of the revolution. Don't listen to the foreign agitation, and that these protests are being fueled by places like the United States. Iran has already complained about American involvement, and that this is plots by foreign saboteurs and terrorists. That already today, Iran said that it had captured some explosives that it said were planted there to disrupt the election process and to cause chaos. So this seems to be the direction that they're heading in, which is to say, don't listen to this, don't be fooled and agitated, trust the system, give us more time. The third would be if he came out and said, congratulations, we must all unite behind President Ahmadinejad, everyone get home or you will be shot.
Yeah.
And so I think you'll probably see something in the middle which buys a little bit more time.
Realistically, what do the protesters do if it is that one, as opposed the third one obviously leads to chaos, the first one leads to dancing in the streets. If the middle one is the most likely, this protest, as you described, it has morphed in so many different ways already. What happens next?
That's why they play it cool. That's why they're not shouting the slogans anymore. They have to stay out there. They have to use their energy and to continue this movement and to not give in. That would be their response. Their response will be, we're staying out in the street, but we're not going to provoke a fight. Iran hasn't declared curfews. Just being out on the street is not illegal.
Right.
They're not, if you're not destroying property, they're just out on the street expressing their demands.
If it is not a hardline crackdown, and again, we calculated this before the show, we're talking about 3:30 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, so we'll know this by the morning, what at least the statement will have been.
By the time America wakes up, we should have an idea.
Can it be fairly said that unless it is an absolute crackdown, that nation has already changed significantly in the last week?
Not yet. Not yet. It has changed in that a lot of expression has been made public, and a lot of people's voices have been heard, and there's been a lot of attention focused on Iran, and that's positive. People in America and around the world know more about Iran than they did before, and they know that it is not just a black and white society full of mullahs who want to get the bomb. It's much more sophisticated than that. So it's changed that way. But if Mousavi is suddenly declared the victor and new elections happen, yes, it's changed a lot. If Iran decides they're going to fully back Ahmadinejad and crack down and send in the tanks, it's changed because they could be heading toward a crisis. If they just take this middle ground and blame it on outsiders and say, give us a few more days to work out the process, then it's still an ongoing story.
I guess it is life or death there. It is fascinating here and obviously has all sorts of extraordinary implications here. But we are, again, grateful that our chief foreign correspondent, Richard Engel, has been here the last few days to help us
I'd rather be there, but I didn't have much of a choice.
Well, the good with the bad coming out of this. Thank you again, sir.